mā kina kiute, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te a tākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Sorry, I didn't have my mic on.
That's right. Carry on. So we're on a Teams link, so that's why we're using these microphones, because there'll be a few people online. My intention is now to hand the chair over to Claire Buchanan. What we're doing here is just trying to just get a bit of experience and give people a chance to be chairperson and run the meeting. And I thought it'd be an easy process, but there's a bit of a protocol to this. So the vice chairman is not available. He's apology for lateness, Chris Allen. We've circulated the rest of the committee to see if they approve of me vacating the chair for this meeting, and they've all replied in the positive, or haven't replied at all. So we'll just, we've got to move what do we have to move something? A secret resolution. So I'll move a motion. Well, is that what I do?
Yes.
I'll move a motion to step aside from the chair for this meeting and to be replaced by Claire Buchanan. I'll move that as the seconder. Ian McKenzie. All those in favour, please aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
All right, we'll start with the apologies. So Addie and Neil aren't able to make it today, and I think Chris is going to be joining us, but at a later point. So we received the apologies. Do we get a second? Is that enough? Yeah, cool. All right, we're moving on to extraordinary business. Are there any matters that need to be raised? Nope. Any updates to the register of interest? Nope. All right, so then we have to confirm the meeting minutes from the 23rd of April. Can somebody confirm that they're true and accurate?
We do. Oh, sorry, we do have one amendment to be made on the second to last page relating to the Wakanui Hapua project. So the details, I just actually go to that page. Instead of it saying to assist with costs associated to water quality testing and collection and lab costs associated with baseline water quality monitoring, etc., that should actually be funding from the Wakanui Beach Crew Group for a feasibility study into refilling the Wakanui Hapua. So if we could just get that noted, Carol, that would be great. Thank you. Oh yes, no, it was declined, but the details for that project are actually the Hikiau Hines Hill Country Catchment Group. So we're just correcting the description of the project that was declined.
It says in the minutes that the motion is carried.
Oh, it says at the end of that line. Baseline water quality monitoring for a 12-month period be declined. So the project, it was declined. We're just fixing up the description. We've accidentally carried the Hikiau Hines one down onto that project.
So it's just deleting that line which belongs to the Hikiau Hines one. Right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
So it would be useful just to take out the carrying bit after the Wakanui Beach Group. So this being
Wakanui Beach Crew. That carried. Oh, I think that's part of the decision making, isn't it? The moved and the seconded and then carried.
I think what's happened, Ian, is two motions have been moved into one. So that last sentence should belong to the Hickory Hines Hill High Country Catchment Group, and somehow it's fallen down into the Wakanui group. So we carried the Wakanui one, so that's correct for that. But they've put another sentence in there which didn't belong there. In the minutes it's been wrongly recorded. So it's carried. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's just confusing the way it's written.
It is confusing, so we're going to deconfuse it and move it out.
Minutes is to try and
Yeah.
make a clear account of what happened.
Ian, you're going to need to turn your microphone on.
So I tried. Oh, yeah, there we are. And look, the minutes are just confusing because it says it was declined, but then the motion was carried, which is like a double negative. But
Oh, yeah.
if you see what I'm saying, so
Yeah.
either just take away the carried bit and the mover and seconder, or you can leave the mover and seconder in, but just make sure it's clear that that was declined. Sorry, I'm just being pedantic.
Is that correct, Carol?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so with those updates, can we move to confirm the minutes as true and accurate? And seconded, thanks. All right, moving on to correspondence. So we received a letter from Stephanie Riker?
Rixica?
Pardon?
Oh, Rixica?
Rixica. In response to Bill's letter.
Yep.
And
I'll just note the outward correspondence. So we sent, the Zone Committee sent a letter to Andrew Parrish regarding the Zone Committee's feedback on the draft regional policy statement. And also there was a new addition last week. A letter went to Environment Canterbury regarding investigating the options for Green Street, which was a resolution made at the April meeting.
great. The public contributions, this thing, or is that something separate?
Was there a mention of another letter that we received? I know we only had a workshop last time, but was there a letter received specific to Green Street from ECAN? I can recall something being read out.
Was that not the letter from Stephanie Rixica? Oh, no, I think that was actually noted in the minutes for the last meeting, wasn't it?
Because we were only a workshop last time, it was read out, but it wasn't tabled, and I wondered if there was a copy that we could circulate. It felt like it was the most current information back from ECAN regarding that Green Street situation, if my memory serves me well.
Or was that April? The April meeting.
I think it was at the workshop, and it was read out. It hadn't been circulated. I think it had just come in literally when we had the workshop. So I don't know that it's come in anywhere as correspondence in.
I'm not sure. I can look into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this something different than this? All right, are there any public contributions to be made?
Well, can I just perhaps make a comment on the letter from Stephanie from ECAN? Does that mean they're just going to carry on with the process as it is, effectively? Just from that letter, they're not going to do anything special, effectively, or they might send out a letter proactively to the consent holders. Sorry, to say that you've got to do something. You know, the last line. Where is it? To support that we are proactively sending reminders to consent holders. So that's all they're really doing. Is that correct? Is that what that means?
They weren't going to make any, acknowledging that there was, they acknowledged that there was a hardship, they weren't going to give
No concessions.
any concessions. Ian might have something to that, I'm not sure.
No, I've got no comment on that. But I was going to comment on the letter. So deal with Richard's point first. But I wanted to make a comment about the letter as well.
Okay, yeah, yes, it's just as it was written there, Richard, so I didn't see there being any change.
My comment about the letter is that Stephanie says that she wants the community to contact her staff. In the third paragraph, I encourage them to contact Environment Canterbury early. In the case of the Green Street Creek, they did that. They came to me. I notified Environment Canterbury that there was an issue 2 months before it came to a head. And so I think it would be worth noting in the minutes, please, that the community did notify the Regional Council in plenty of time for the regional council to do something about the Green Street Creek issue, but that advice was ignored. And you can say that Councillor Mackenzie took it to Environment Canterbury on request from the Green Street Creek people.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, any other public contributions to be made? About the public forum, any queries or comments with that? All right, well, we'll move on to the presentation on Lake Camp about the Balmacan diversion. So Vanessa, if you want to come up and speak to us.
And in the light of the same discussion, the Lake Camp issue was raised at their annual meeting back at the beginning of February this year. So ECAN has been aware of this issue, just in case the Chief Executive decides to tell us that she didn't know anything about it, for several months now.
E te ti, e te tā, mariora kia koutou katoa. E meni ana ke te mana whenua. Ko maanga gai toko maanga. Ko o te tari toko awa. Ko Wellman toko whakapapa. Ko ngā tahu toko iwi. Nā hakatere ahau. Ke o te tahi toko kaianga NINA. Ko Vanessa Wright, toko ingoa. Nore rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Got it. I've also brought with me Tony Moore, who's the chairperson of the Aquatic Club, and Jeff Hyde, who's also the chairperson of the Holders Association. So I'm here as I'm connected to the Lake Camp area. It's where I connect to the land, my family and friends, and it's a place I want my great-great-grandchildren to be able to connect to as well. A space to disconnect from daily life, to swim, to jump off the raft, snorkel for fish, biscuit or ski. I am here to represent the Lake Clearwater Hut Holders Association, but I'm also here to represent the people I don't know yet and maybe never will. The people that go on those 2 or 3 buses over summer from the cruise ships every day over summer, people who go to swim and just look at the lake. I am here to ask for your help to look after a lake, to learn and to understand, and hopefully find a way to ensure that Lake Camp can fill back up just as it has for the last 50 odd years. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to discuss my proposal, really appreciate it, to put the Balmacan stream diversion back in place. Thanks to those involved in organising, but a special thanks to Ange and Jamie for your help. It's also great to see possibly a few people from my meeting a few weeks ago online, because I think more discussion is required in certain areas. Anyway, I've just got a couple of this day and age. There's this thing called TikTok, so I've just got a couple of these things to look at. There's no sound. Anyway. Can I turn the sound up somehow? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The scenery is the important bit. Thanks, Ange. And here's just one more quick road trippy one. Basically just, yeah. This is just everywhere. It's bringing lots of visitors to the lake, which is super awesome. So if we look at this photo of Lake Camp, I'm not exactly sure at what time of the year it was taken, but it's the one that the Ashburton District Council have on their website. You will notice, actually you can't see my mouse, but if you look at the lake level regarding where the trees are, where the buoys are, and where the raft is, obviously it's looking like a great place to swim and hang out. It's a beautiful spot, as we just saw stated on social media, that it's one of New Zealand's best kept secrets. It's a place for connecting with nature, friends and family. It's a place for road trips, picnics, camping, swimming, sightseeing, fishing, paddleboarding, boating, jet skiing and probably other stuff I haven't even listed. Here's a picture I took of Lake Camp just on Sunday. So if we notice, it's great, I can see the picture of Lake Camp from the ADC website still up there. Notice the levels obviously dropped dramatically. The water is nowhere near the trees. The raft, which you can kind of see, is nowhere near the water. The buoys are not in the water. It's obviously a lot shallower. Basically, the lake is at its lowest points since ECAN have started recording, and a lot of the older photos that I have looked at lower than that. As I mentioned, the lake does go up and down, but it's definitely at one of its lowest points. And this graph is actually only showing up until April. I don't have the current data from ECAN in this graph form at the moment. But at this point, when I took a photo, the raft was partially in the water, and I think there was only a couple of buoys floating. So it's obviously decreased quite substantially since then. As you've
Yes, can
seen.
I just butt in for a quick question while you've got the
Yeah,
graph?
sure.
So on the far left of the apex, the 15th to the 12th, 2020, that was when the tape from the stream was still being taken. Was it virtually the end of it?
So Communications from Fish and Game, they ceased to hold the consent in November 2020.
Right.
So,
So there's no water being added in any of those ones.
so that's what I'm just about to talk to.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
so give me a second,
Yep.
I'll get there. Thanks for your question though. So actually I possibly have lost a slide. Yeah, no, sorry, that will come up. So nature is an important part, important need for many and vital in keeping us emotionally, psychologically and physically healthy, as per the Mental Health Foundation website. This lake is an important part of nature. It helps thousands of people reconnect and look after their own and their family's health. Community, it nourishes community. Amazing areas have been set up around Lake Camp by the council. Hundreds of people are creating a community around the lake, and I personally feel that in a lot of areas, communities are no longer as strong as they used to be. So this is just another valuable asset for helping make that happen. Communities such as the one I'm representing help look after these special spaces. We mow lawns, we have planting days, we set up picnic tables next to the lake for everybody to use. We are here to help look after a place that we love, but not just for us, for the hundreds of thousands of people who also value this space. Now, as mentioned, we are seeking the necessary permits for the diversion to be applied for, similar to the ones Fish and Game have held. This ceased in 2020. We're suggesting that the Ashburton District Council could apply for and hold the necessary permits, as it aligns with the goals outlined in the future of Lake Camp, Otatari and Lake Clearwater Te Puna Ataka, the 30-year plan 2022 to 2052. However, we are open to suggestions for other parties or organisations to do this. Now, our proposal has been tabled at the Otawharakai Ashburton Lakes Catchment Group meeting. They've voiced their support of our proposal and acknowledged that the work that we are doing on behalf of Lake Camp is important. The landowner has no objections to the permit being held. Both ECAN and DOC are not willing to hold the consent. So this has come from the meeting, actually I should quantify, this has come from the meeting that I had 2 weeks ago with them here in this building. So both ECAN and DOC are not willing to hold the consent. They've stated that they're happy to let nature take its course, but we're really not sure what that actually means for the native fish and the water quality. Fish and Game have no objection to the permit being gained, however are not keen to develop it as a fishery. That said, I have actually recently learned that at the start of the year they added around 3,000 trout into the lake. Arawhenua are going to go back and talk with their team before stating their official opinion. Just so I'm clear, the questions I put to Arawhenua are as follows. We would like to gain a clear understanding about Te Ruanga Arowhenua values around Lake Camp, especially how these values intersect with lake levels and the division of water. And then from that, gain a greater understanding about local Ruanga perspectives, e.g. if someone was to apply for a consent, would it proceed? And as part of this, how can we help? Not only with the division, but we understand the importance of Lake Ema for hunting and gathering purposes. Maybe we could lead a planting day around Lake Ema or help somehow create a space for this. I personally have ties to Ngāi Tahu, and so I am super keen to protect our cultural and natural heritage. The diversion from the Belmacan stream is what has helped keep Lake Camp ecologically and recreationally healthy for at least 56 years. Yes, as I mentioned before, the lake does go up and down every year. However, this has primarily been driven by the levels in the stream. Without the diversion to help, it can't fill up to the previous levels, as per the graph which follows. I will just find my notes on here before I bring up the next slide. So this is talking to your question before. So if you look at 2021, you'll note that the levels have become higher. Now this was caused by a flood and heavy rain, which actually also took the diversion point out. But before then, obviously, it filled the lake quite substantially. You will also note that there is an increase in 2022. So this was due to another flood where the Belmacan stream crossed the farmland and entered the bottom of the Lake Camp, not via the diversion, but just around the bottom of the hill. It kind of veered out and around towards Lake Camp. Since then, any increase in the rain has resulted in only a very small increase in the level of the lake. It is no longer increasing in the same proportions without the top up from the stream. We can actually also see this if we look at it in a different form. The current data from the new telemetry at both Camp and Ema shows that an increase in waterfall makes Lake Ema's levels increase, but not Lake Camp's. This is due to all of the water from the Belmacan stream going into Lake Ema. The data below is an extract from ECAN's water level website showing this. There is you'll see in a second, there's a sharp increase, but Hamish from ECAN actually had to go up there and adjust it because as much as they'd put it in, it was heading out of the water because I think the water level was dropping faster than what they thought. So that's what that little blip is just there. But the important bit is you'll just note that Lake Ema is obviously increasing, which is great. We need some more water in Lake Ema, but Lake Camp is on the downward slope. So the ecology of the lake. Now this is a tricky one because I am not a water scientist. I just put my hand up to try and sort this problem out. So I'm learning and open to learning as much as I can. I was told at the meeting a few weeks ago that neither DOC nor ECAN are concerned about the lake getting shallower or about the health of the lake. And I'm still actually seeking clarification and also in the process of getting independent advice because it doesn't make sense to me. I've been told wind is the primary driver of lake health, and this was in discussion around Lake Clearwater. And because Lake Camp is deep and steep, it is not at risk. However, Lake Clearwater, which is right next door, is actually 1 metre deeper, according to LAWA, and is currently in a eutrophic state, also according to LAWA, with poor water quality. I have also been told that shallow lakes have worse water quality, but it's primarily on the plains. That said, Lake Ema, according to LAWA, at 3 metres, right next door to Lake Camp, is also in a eutrophic state and has poor water quality. I'm grateful for the information that both ECAN and DOC are providing. It's all useful, and I'm definitely grateful that we're having conversation. This is a good thing. However, I'm really not sure how they can say that the lake health is not at risk by it getting shallower, especially with the two lakes in visual distance, both in a eutrophic state. Now, as much as the current data, which is this year is still 100% to be confirmed, is suggesting the TLI index for Lake Kemp has not changed dramatically, the monitoring / time it takes to get a consent processed and ensure all interested parties are satisfied, we don't think will keep up with the rate at which the lake is currently draining. This will result in a shallower lake, which has therefore more of the macrophyte bed exposed. This is a problem in shallow lakes as the wind action is effective at resuspending sediment. This introduces phosphorus, which can cause a decline in lake health. Macrophyte beds are more effective at preventing the resuspension of sediments. We do have a portion of the lake which is deeper and at less risk of stratification, which is another cause in an increase of phosphorus. However, the portion of the lake that is deeper, so 10 metres and deeper, which will now probably be sitting at about 7 or 8, according to our calculation, makes up about 15% of the lake. The rest of this is currently under this level and is shrinking quickly. We can see here, it's probably quite hard to see the 10, but it's about the second light blue colour in, if we're to look at that. So this is our chance to be proactive. From the reading I have done, especially given the conditions of not just the surrounding lakes but worldwide, it seems it is very hard and costly to turn a lake around once it is in a super or eutrophic state, e.g. Lake Clearwater and Lake Emma. To me, it makes sense to be proactive instead of reactive and look after the lakes that are heading in this direction, especially when it's as simple as this. And I know it's not simple because there's lots of political and policies and all these other things in place that I'm learning all about. This diversion has been in place for 60 years. To me, it seems nuts that we can't just put it back in place to simply keep a lake in good health. Anyway, one of our considerations in doing this, though, is to look at the effects of the diversion on other lakes, because we don't want to harm other lakes. Even though it has been in place for a long time, we don't want to contribute to making the other lakes worse. In particular, if we're to look at Lake Emma, which is directly affected by the Balmacan stream, you will note on the following graph that the diversion has been in place ever since recording has begun, yet the TLI has still fluctuated wildly. I'll just get to that in a second. So here's the TLI index for Lake Emma. I think it's important to note that even around the time when the Balmacan stream was in flood, so if we look at 2021, the TLI score is actually still on the high side, so even when there was a lot of water flowing into there. Now, from my reading in a Bioscience article, 2021, October 71, all of sorts of factors such as light, temperature, wind, waterfowl waste, down to water or filtering snails, all have an effect on the condition of a lake. We can clearly see here that history shows us that the diversion being in place has not had an effect on Lake Emma's water quality, because it's been in place this whole time, that it's been fluctuating dramatically. Now, to the recreational side of things. It is noted that the Ashburton District Reserve Management Plan currently out for consultation includes the following: to continue to monitor the water quality of the lake to ensure recreational activities can continue to be safely carried out, and that they will contemplate leases and licenses within existing footprints on recreation reserve land for organised sport and facilities, e.g. water-related facilities. As it currently stands, as you saw in the picture earlier that I took on Sunday, if the lake level does not rise, we believe that the council will not be able to meet the above two objectives. It will be recreationally unsafe for all of the users in summertime. As mentioned, the council have spent time and money developing the campgrounds around the lake, and they have done a great job. It looks amazing. These may not be as valuable if the lake is either a puddle, no longer there, or unsafe to swim in. So particularly over summer, this is even more important due to the other lakes in the area dying / no longer being able to be used for recreational purposes. Obviously, this fluctuates year to year, but Lake Hood is an example from last year. At current levels, as you saw before, the swimming area is non-existent. And this is a very popular spot over the summer, particularly for families day tripping, and is a good way to keep swimmers, mostly children, from the motorised area of the lake. From a boating, jet skiing perspective, the boat ramp is definitely no longer in use. The water is metres away from the bottom of it. Other areas are unnecessarily being used for this purpose. The lake is obviously a lot smaller, so there is less space for boats, jet skis to drive, therefore increasing the risk of injury and accident. This also increases the risk of harm for the campers using the nice camping area that's been set up by the council, basically because, understandably so, they go out and they swim and they take their kayaks and everything, and which is great, and then you've got boats going around, so there's a smaller space and you've got people swimming and kayaking all around the edge of the lake having a great time, but there's just more danger from the perspective of the boats being there as well. And this is full over the summer months. Now, just touching on a bit of history, I was talking to a couple of older guys in the weekend, and Ian actually brought this up at our meeting a couple of weeks ago, just trying to find a little bit more about the history. I actually just learnt that back in the early 1960s, the only available area for boating purposes was the Rangitada Lagoon, and it was proving to be unsafe. So a group of people went to what they believe is called the Catchment Group, which I guess is similar to ECAN now or something similar to that. And they gave permission for Lake Camp to be used for recreational purposes. So that, they think, was the official start of it being used for recreation. Fish and Game have held the permit for 20 years for recreational purpose, and the division has been classified as historical use. So finally, just questions. Do we have your support to help us save the lake by putting the Balmacan Stream Diversion back in place? If so, who would apply / hold the consent? Given Ashburton District's Council's objectives, as just described, and their website promotes Lake Camp for recreational use, does it not seem logical that it would be them? If not, who else? And what ideas or suggestions do you have to help us make this happen, or any other general comments or questions?
Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, definitely support your proactive approach in this, so it's really great first steps. Does anyone have any comments or questions they want to make?
Thanks, Vanessa, and your support crew. Well done, well presented. It's not so much a question for yourself, but I notice we've got John from DOC in the room, so I wonder if there's a chance just to, is there any other information that they would like to put forward so we can have a more robust discussion? Steve McKnight looks like he's on from Fish and Game, but just curious.
Yeah, hi, I'm John from DOC in Christchurch. As Vanessa said, the water quality issue is a very complex whole lot of issues. I'm not a water quality scientist, but very close. I'm a geomorphologist, geologist, blah, blah, blah. The two reasons why DOC wouldn't hold the consent is because just the cost of it. That's the main reason why Fish and Game gave up the consent and the maintenance. And DOC's not 100% convinced of the ecological benefits of diverting the stream into the lake. I think it probably has as much benefit feeding the wetlands, and with the current Otawharakai wetland restoration project going on. Also, a thing that hasn't been mentioned, I wasn't at the meeting a couple of weeks ago that Vanessa was talking about, but just information I've had to meet too. But a thing that hasn't been mentioned is, besides resource consent, you'd also need permission from DOC if the structure was on public conservation land, and that's a completely separate planning in statutory process to RMAs and stuff. So you can have all the resource consents in the world from ECAN or whoever, but if DOC doesn't give you permission, they're irrelevant, basically. So that's another thing you have to think about. Now, I can't say whether you get that or not because I have nothing to do with that, and depends what the proposal is. And also with the ecology of the lake as well as before the stream was diverted. I mean, that's what the lake naturally did anyway. That's what the lakes do. They fluctuate in level, and eventually over geological time they do infill and disappear completely. And the fact that trout are being released into it doesn't do a lot for the native fish health either. So,
No, I agree.
yeah, so
That wasn't my decision.
yeah. So that's sort of I can't really add a lot to what Chris and Tony said at the meeting 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, well, that's just, you have to be aware of the whole other statutory process to get permission from DOC for structures on public conservation land, which is totally different to ECAN or District Council resource management consents. Yes, well, if there's any other questions.
Can I just ask a question? Is there clear boundaries or a list of what one would need to comply for DOC to approve of a structure being built?
There's no one rule. It's case by case thing. So you'd have to come up with an engineering design and all that sort of thing, and the hydrology and how it will affect the hydrology of the wetlands and all sorts of things like that.
Okay.
Yep. So you can't just say, "Oh, can we put a weir or a diversion gate there or whatever?" And big rubber stamp.
Yeah, no, I figured, but it's just trying to understand, obviously, what the requirements would be. But
Yeah. So there'd be a permissions team in Christchurch that would deal with
that
things
kind
like
of
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Would you recommend that they get that from DOC, the permission from DOC before getting the consent, or would it be better to have the consent first?
Possibly DOC, because if DOC didn't give the permission, then there's no point applying for the consents.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Ian?
Well, I've got a few issues with what's just been said, and one of them is it seems to be a double standard in terms of we're saying we'll let nature take its course, but in other cases, and take the Maori Lakes, which are naturally eutrophying because of their position in the catchment, we're doing everything we can to stop that process. And yet, for the lake camp, we seem to be very happy just to turn our back and walk away from the state of the lake. And I don't think there's any question. You don't need to be a top-level water scientist to know that if you cut off the water supply into a puddle, the puddle will eventually stagnate and go manky. And this is significantly one of the main recreational water recreational spots for mid-Canterbury. There's Lake Camp and there's Lake Hood, and that's always been the case. So, I think this is a community decision rather than a DOC or anybody else decision, because I think DOC, we can go to the Minister of Conservation and ask for their support for protecting what we consider to be a really valuable asset for this district. I also have a concern about people pretending that they know what the historical nature of Lake Camp is, because we don't actually have much data, I think, Vanessa, on that. And when you look at the nature of Balmacan Stream, it's clearly cutting down into the gravels. And that, from my observation, I'm not an expert on the Balmacan, but that looks like it started since, well, it's been a gradual process, but it's certainly cutting down into the shingles from about the point of the diversion, and it's going back up. So it may well be that historically, before they put in the diversion 60 years ago, that Balmacan flowed on top of the shingles and used to naturally flow down into the lake, and maybe it was a flood that cut it down and stopped the water coming down into Lake Camp. And I've been trying to get hold of someone who might know that, but old people are running out of who have that level of history, and I can't get hold of one of the oldest hut holders in the area to get hold of, to ask her whether she has any background knowledge of that. So but in living memory, the Balmacan stream has flown into Lake Camp, and I suspect a lot of people didn't necessarily know that until this issue has come. I mean, I've been water skiing up there since I was quite young, and it never occurred to me that the lake was kept at a constant level because of the diversion. And I guess if you don't need to know that, you don't necessarily know those things. But it's clear that from the graphs, even though we are in a dry patch, that the Balmacan stream is a really critical part of keeping Lake Camp healthy. It's also notable that Lake Camp is the only lake in the Ashburton Lakes system that has met its TLI targets in the Regional Council plan. It's also notable to say that it actually hasn't got the same issues as Lake Emma and Lake Camp in terms of sediments and phosphates, because when you see the photographs you've got there, Vanessa, it's clean shingle that has been exposed. We're not, but if you did that to Lake Clearwater, I suspect you'd see quite a lot of mud on the bottom. You'd have mud flats rather than clean shingle, and that's one of the reasons Lake Camp has been clean. Has had historically high water quality because of the nature of its bed, which it's totally different to Lake Clearwater, and there's been no improvements in the land that sheds into Lake Camp in the history of Lake Camp. So you've got all those issues going on. I think it's in terms of who holds the consent. I suspect it probably does go down to the District Council, because I think it's they represent the Ashburton community, and it is an asset for the Ashburton community. I tried to suggest that the Regional Council could apply for and hold the consents and persuade DOC for permissions to do the work, but they are disinclined to want to do that. And probably when you think, and my argument for that was that they had a responsibility under the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water to maintain and improve the water quality in various water bodies, and clearly the only way you can maintain and improve the water quality in Lake Camp is by keeping the Balmacan stream flowing into it. I thought that could be a compelling reason, but I suspect the community desire to have it as a recreational lake is a more compelling reason, and that then falls into the District Council, so I'm passing the ball.
Yeah, so from what I can pick up, the District Council was not keen to do it from your meeting. Is that what they portrayed?
That they communicated that initially they wouldn't. However, they said if we could discuss it with the councillors, and if you guys thought that it was worthwhile saving, then it could be something that could happen.
So effectively what's that saying is politically the District Council could make a decision to support it. I can't speak on behalf of the councillors, so that's probably the avenue you would have to go down rather than getting a groundswell of support up through and being presented. It has to come through the councillors to request rather than do it. So that could come through the zonal committee effectively. Couldn't that be the logical if the zonal committee decided that was the way it wanted to go? Because the District Council is a 50-50 partner, and so that would be an avenue to go through. But so it has to be done politically rather than scientifically, you'd almost say. Does that answer the question?
Vanessa, great presentation, and good to see the passion of what's happening up there. That whole Lake Camp, Clearwater area has been significant to Mid Canterbury for as long as I can remember, and we certainly need it to stay. Part of the working policy under Canterbury Water Management Strategy is recreation, and there's not much of that around here now. We're losing a lot of it, and I have to bite my tongue when Doc just almost say, well, you're going to have to get through me and get through that, but I wouldn't let that put you off. I think as Councillor Mackenzie said, and Wilson, I think the Zone Committee, if it wants to, could recommend to ADC how we think this should process through, but it's an asset for generations to come, and I'm 100% behind getting the water back in there, and keeping the status quo that used to be. I think it's unacceptable.
Thank you.
I'm Tony from the Clearwater Aquatic Club, president of the Clearwater Aquatic Club. I'd just like to thank Vanessa on the presentation that she's done. It's an area that's very close to my heart as well. Just what John was saying from Doc there about if you're going to divert the Ballymacan, it's the water's better off going down through Emma, through the wetlands, while physical driving along the eastern end of Lake Camp when it's in flood, the water is actually flowing in that general direction as well. So imagine Lake Camp as a cascade. When it's full, it's actually feeding water to Clearwater and to Emma as well. So that goes down through the wetlands of Emma. I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. My portfolio as the Aquatic Club chairperson is watercraft safety, and I know Ian said that he spent years up there, and yourself as well. It's a very high priority. ECAN, we had to cancel our water ski champs this year. We closed Lake Camp off every year for this event. That goes through the harbour master. We pay a fee for that. Had to pull the pin this year because when you've got water skiers going into a turn buoy at 100 k's an hour, and that turn buoy is in 300 mils of water, it's not safe to do so. So I just want all those points from my portfolio just put out there as well, how passionate this is. Across this table here, the passion, we stand for 180 batches up there in the hut holder side. We've got a membership in the Clearwater Aquatic Club of about 60 people, so there's a whole lot of that going on. And I'd just like to also say that the money that the Ashburton District Council have spent up there with their plantings, their toilet blocks, and nice 3 new toilet blocks, they are encouraging so many people to come in and enjoy this space with us, with the 180 hut holders and with the Aquatic Club members. And then you're seeing people driving in there, and the ugly duckling in the middle is the puddle that's got no water in it. So there's the main reason they're coming there to camp along the sides of Lake Camp is for the one reason of enjoy the water space. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you, that's helpful context. Yeah. Angela?
So further to what Tony's talking about and what's been covered around the room, footnote, I learnt to ski there. It was a wooden boat and a wooden ski a very long time ago, but a huge part of a lot of people's upbringing here. I'm seriously challenged by Doc and their approach to happy to let nature take its course, followed by a discussion about a permission team, followed by case by case. So case by case, if you took it a high level discussion, are we happy to let nature take its course? Because a lot of this community input and engagement, it's hugely time consuming. It's very emotional. Vanessa's connected on the wellbeing component of it. So I think case by case, permission team, happy to let nature take its course. There's a big message coming at us there. And we're not just talking about Lake Camp. So, the ramifications of that discussion need to be well thought through. Otherwise, everybody from a community perspective packs up and gives up, because if there's no willingness from the Department of Conservation to entertain these types of discussion, I'm just not sure what the future looks like.
All right, well, I think we're in relative agreement that it might be best for the zone committee to write a letter to the district council supporting this change, and yeah, for the community as well as for water quality at the lake, and preserving one of the best water qualities in that area. So yeah, can I get a move for that?
Well, I'm happy to move that, and I think in the letter we should point out, as Angela just said, all the money and resource that the ADC has spent in this recreational area, how it's recreational. It just seems crazy not to support it.
Yeah.
And our recommendation would be that they look at whether they can hold the consent, or a body that can, a trust or whatever, to hold that consent,
And talk to Doc about getting the necessary permissions.
we'll deal with Doc.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to move the letter be sent to ADC.
Second by Ange. Thanks, Ange. All right. Thanks.
But perhaps just some discussion on that. As the meeting, Carl Russell from Arafanua just talked about, needs to sit and talk about it with other members of Arafanua, do we, we want to engage with them as part of this process because, they've, talked about a willingness to have discussion on it, talk about it. So rather than we shoot a message up saying do it without actually talking to them, we need to be a bit careful there, I would have thought.
Have you got any comment on that sort of side?
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't have anything else to add, but I'm fully supportive of this. Mahi, yep. Go press the left.
Do we copy Arafina into this as well, or I thoroughly agree they should be included.
Yeah, definitely include them in that correspondence. And we have a message from Steve saying it needs to be recognized that there's no evidence of water quality. The issue is, it is solely recreational. Okay. But I think if the water quantity is decreasing annually, it will eventually lead to a quality issue, even if there's no evidence for that at this current time. Yeah.
Could I suggest that the letter is asking the District Council for support on solving the issue at Lake Camp without demanding that they necessarily hold the consents or get the permissions, and that perhaps a follow-up letter go to Arafina. We're asking for their support as well, so that we get the agencies to support as many as we can. Clearly, we're going to have a battle with DOC, and then the next step after that might be for the Zone Committee or for the Ashburton District Council, or a combination of hut holders, recreationalists, District Council, and the Zone Committee might then approach the Minister of Conservation looking for their support. So we sort of have a program of how we can get the right support, the necessary support to actually progress this. Is that okay with you, Bill, as the mover of the motion?
I wasn't planning on beating ADC over the head. I thought that general approach would be the way that Jamie would draft the letter up. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, could I just clarify that I said Doc wasn't particularly keen on holding the consent, but I've never said you're not going to get permission or not. I mean, you just got to apply and see what the process does. Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Thanks. All right, I think that's everything. So thank you guys for coming to present to us today. And yeah, we will action that letter and hopefully get some resolutions.
I guess for Carol and my benefit, so is the action for the committee to write a letter to ADC to support the proposal presented by Vanessa and Co? Is that more or less the first step?
Ask the District Council for their support for Vanessa and the Zone Committee's position.
And the Zone Committee's position, thanks.
And so we are clear, it's not just Vanessa, is it? So the proposal's coming from
Hut holders?
hut holders.
The hut holders.
We'll just get that wording right as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
don't put it all on me. Please.
Okay, so.
Thank you, everybody, though, and thank you so much for your support and your input. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
All right, up next we've got,
But just before we move,
Yeah.
are we going to send something to Alpha to have them in the loop? I think it's very wise to at the early stage to bring them into the loop now, so that because we've had Carl has said he's going to go back and have a talk about it, so it's quite nice just to follow that right at the very beginning, so that we've actually brought them into the conversation before anything's effectively happened. Is that a fair comment? Because they are part of, just because they've got a representative, they're part of the Zone Committee.
Do we know, do they still read minutes even though they don't have a representative? Or we have to engage with them separately outside of this process? Do we know?
They get the documents, whether they read them or not, I don't know. Yeah.
Could I suggest that we send two letters? One is to Ashburton, basically saying the same thing. We're asking them for their support. One goes to the District Council and is targeted to the District Council for their support, and the other is to Arawhenua to ask them for their support. And the wording might be slightly different, but the theme will be exactly the same. Madam Chair.
Yes.
I don't know, like, well, yeah. If we're a party of three, should we ask again?
Good idea. Yep.
So, checking, so letters to ADC, Arowhenua, Environment Canterbury, and as Councillor Mackenzie noted, all asking for support, but slightly different wording, depending on which party it is.
All right, great. Now we've got Greg Stanley from the Braided River Revival, and he's going to give us an update on the work undertaken in Ashburton as part of the BRR berm transition work. Thanks, Greg. The right side, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Greg, and I just want to briefly share what we've been doing, much of which was in the Hakatiri over the last 3 years. Hopefully many of you have heard of some of our work before or read it in messaging from our river section or other forums. Ian certainly has. The Braided River Revival team exists as a group within the River Section Environment Canterbury, and our goal is to build multi-value assets into the flood protection estate in order to try and benefit and achieve a range of outcomes beyond strictly traditional river engineering practices. And this is just a really, really concept way of considering a braided river and the range of values and things. You'll notice boats on the lake at the top of this as well, so definitely recognised from the outset. It seeks to have a sort of a double approach with interaction with the planning level coupled with action on the ground. Today's focus is what we've been doing on the ground since December 2020. One of the outcomes is the development of strategies. Some of you may have seen pieces from the work on the Rakitata as well. Typical flood protection in the lower modified reaches. I'm really enjoying how this computer's changed all the fonts to like a 1980s thing. It wasn't the intended font, but Jamie's got the good one on Teams. We've got some binary thing. That's okay. Typically, the items of vegetative infrastructure that are used to manage flooding are the following. We've got, we have a piece called a fairway or an active braid if you lean more towards the ecological side of things, a clear area of gravels in the centre of an appropriate width as determined by a river engineer to convey the flood volumes of water in a high peak event. You have on the very outside a series of stop bank structures with occasionally lateral groins and rock walls and things to send water back towards the decided fairway, and the stop bank structures are defended by the vegetated berm, which is typically arranged plantings of fast growing or vegetation like the willow and poplar that we know very well for sort of the centre plain out to the coast. And our interest is in working with this area and trying to incorporate other values or other functions into this space while not losing functions. A lot of our work that I'll show you today was created by in response to the heavy flooding that was observed in a range of rivers between 2019 and then the subsequent floods in 2021. I'm sure many of you will be well aware of the impacts in your own catchment. Because of the way flood defence has been delivered, we've sort of created like a novel ecology where we have these berms that have become very high light, and while wooded, there's still high disturbance, and they remain sort of modified, and the changeover cycle is still happening on a 5 to 10 year cycle, which means that they get really heavy infestations with plant species or pest species that can thrive in those conditions. So because it's changing so frequently, every 5 to 10 years is pretty damn frequently for a forest of any kind, they get dominated by fast-growing species like old man's beard. You'll be well aware of that. There's a fantastic infestation just over here by the bridge. But they're not devoid of value. So even though it's a really difficult level of infestation to manage, they also play these vegetated berms that run along and flank our rivers now, that they're also critical habitat to certain species. For example, the Te Anau Way into the Opahi down near Pleasant Point is a critical habitat for short and long-tailed bat species, and the majority of the rivers host the shining cuckoo on the left, which actively lives in flood protection willow stands, feeds off them, etc. So there's still something there. And then on the forest floor of these modified stands, this is beneath flood protection, willow and poplar. We do have areas where there's a seed source available, where functional forest processes like recruitment, the establishment of fern layers, the development of wetland type habitats beneath them still occurs and is still part of that. And there's a few images from some of my work on the Waimakariri. We've got a whole host of fern species on the left, and then on the right some orchids, that's some Pterostylis green hood orchids developing beneath flood protection willow stands smothered in old man's beard. And so there's things amongst them as well. So there's a range of values occupying the same spaces. Our projects sought to define and deliver projects that were primarily for the benefit of flood protection, but also incorporated or benefited or enhanced other values like community use or recreation, similar to what you've just been engaging with up at Lake Camp, or biodiversity values like the things I've suggested in the previous slides, or kaitiakitanga values or benefits to mahinga kai, availability, accessibility, things like that. We have a team, that's us on the left, doing various projects. We've run some with schools or catchment groups, etc. So a whole range of things. We were busy delivering up until the end of December 2023. The work was funded by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment with a dual focus of benefiting regional infrastructure as well as post-COVID creation of jobs. And so we've sort of navigated that, used it to build these add value projects as one of the many things delivered under the Climate Resilience portfolio. We developed 74 sites, you can see them there. Some of our metrics on the screen. I don't need to go into too great a detail. I'm going to skip through a couple of the projects that we delivered to get to something relevant to you here in Ashburton, but still wanted to include it. Some of our larger projects actually just sought to remove problematic willow and poplar growth from the centre part of river corridors that had become encroached and overgrown. This one from the Waipara up north of Amberley. You can see the encroachment over time, and then our post-works image in October. Pretty extensive work there. We had a similar project on the Rakitara. This was done in collaboration with Arowhenua, interest in our partners at DOC. This is DOC land. And this is an area that flowed as an island, even up, you'll see there, up until as late as 1990. But had become completely encroached with pest plant vegetation and with a range of fantastic tools, tungsten carbine teeth on a back of a forestry mulch. We opened it up again, which is stupidly ambitious, and we're going to try and hold on to this and monitor and see how successful we can be. But we're definitely watching the rain radar because we need about 800 cumecs to get water pumping back through there in a really flowing channel. It is flowing, it is spring fed, there are a range of channels through there, but here you go. That's dramatically increased the capacity of this particular reach of the Rakitara. So there's a few examples. Ashburton specific, these are our assets. This is from our publicly available maps, but this is where we've been working and interested in trying to get some things on the map in the Ashburton catchment. The first element of our effort is it's nothing too fancy, but it's just targeted weed control. We develop an area of interest and we specifically remove, say, 6 to 10 of the problematic pest species whilst leaving the flood protection species or, for argument's sake, the more benign pest plants that might be in the area. We see a benefit if we don't just wipe out everything, but selectively remove the most problematic, giving a benefit to the others. You can see the goals listed there. One example of success has been a site that we have been developing near Bar Hill, and where we've been really quite lucky and happy with the outcomes on the ground there. We've had some very successful weed control, and we can hold on to the area that we've impacted quite affordably now. Other sites have had extensive planting. This is a site from the Upihi, and coupling our targeted weed control with supplementary planting of sub-canopy native vegetation is our effort to hit weeds really hard, but then also to shut them out by absorbing the light and the nutrients and the things that give them the foothold in the first place. So we want to occupy the space that we're vacating, essentially. The strategies that we're employing are quite simple. Typically, restoration work in our industry reaches for open sites or wants to clear a site out completely first and work in a fully exposed highlight environment. We find that we have much more success working on an edge or in semi-shade or in a sub-canopy environment, particularly if we're trying to compete with vigorous pest vine species. We've done quite a lot of monitoring with our work, and we've really found that there's quite the sweet spot associated with much of our vegetation. 5 to 10 metres on the leeward side, on the southern side, or the sheltered side of any given stand grows more than 3 times faster than what we see in an open field site. So through the delivery of our project, we've been able to hone the area that we seek to develop and really narrow in on areas that we've got a high degree of confidence in. Also noting that southern side of the stand, if we develop that, then that also in turn creates sort of a frontier effect, like a moving front that we can use in the years to come. That it creates a moving edge of hybrid vegetation that we can get to spread and disperse into the wider environment.
Just while you're on.
Absolutely.
Where's the river? Is it on the left-hand side or the right?
Which photo?
Well, no, of the diagram. Of where your opportunities are.
Sure. Yeah. I'll speak to the graph. So where's the river in the graph? It really depends what you're looking at. Often, this is us trying to occupy a patch. So if we're coming in to try and give a benefit to an area, it's usually because it's been smothered in vines, and what the vines do is one of the worst impacts for flood protection vegetation is they create greatly exacerbated wind sail on trees. So they're hanging on these trees, and things like crack willow will fall down really easy, poplar will drop limbs and fall out, and so you get holes in what are supposed to be dense block stands to defend the stop banks, essentially. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer, I apologise. But the river's usually on the other side of where those trees would be, but it can really be any side of this. It's more speaking about the impact of the shade and depending where the shade comes from. But typically the frontline willow is the first thing repaired by my colleagues, and so that would always be standing, for example. So for the sake of comment, it would be those standing trees and would be behind that, reinforcing the front line
And the reason for the question, and you've answered it, is that the willows and those exotic species we've used to protect the banks, essentially from flooding, are still vital for the thing. And then you use the native plantings in berm transition further away,
Correct.
where the water, if there is a flood, it'll be slower water and less likely to do any damage, and they're more likely to be able to hold on.
That's absolutely right. So, that's really speaking to the critical engineering. I'll circle back on this in a second as well, because we have put some things into the front line, but we don't propose to take anything away from the existing frontline structures. There's simply nothing, in my opinion, in the native assemblage that grows into a braided river in the same way that willow does. Like, willow establishes itself within 1 to 2 seasons, and that's an incredible tool. It's also the source of it being a massive problem for wetlands and everything else. So it's, it's got a lot of issues, but it's nothing grows quite like it. Anyway, we'll come back to it. But so we're not removing any areas of critical flood protection vegetation. We are supplementing them, and in the longer term, our native vegetation and our native assemblage takes longer to establish, and down the track it might provide similar erosion control benefits to what you're getting from willow in the shorter time frame, but ours is going to take a decade to get to the same point of providing a similar level of erosion control. Right, I'll move on. I'll skip this. This is really where those questions live as well. One of the things we did want to trial was how would native plant use in a fresh scour bay operate? Essentially asking the question, do native plants offer any erosion control in a bare stone environment, in the virgin berm, when we need to establish berm really rapidly following the entire scour of berm. You saw this so many times post Ashburton floods. And so we have several scour-based sites, and we needed to develop tools for vegetating those quickly. Within the bays, we have various options for replant. You'll be very familiar, I'm sure most of you, with groin structure, stop banks, and pole planting installations. I hope you've seen young pole planting installations when they are put in. They would cut a willow pole from a nursery if it's available, or they'll use wild stock if they simply have to get vegetation in place as soon as possible. It's cut 2.5 metres long, and it's dug 1 metre into the ground, so there's 1 metre, 1 to 1.2 metres, either in a deep hole or above ground. The intention being to put the base of the cut pole in the water table, so it's in standing water at the base, and then it roots and grows a tree from that. You'll notice anchor tree protection along the foot of the groin there. That's digging in live stumps of willow from the surrounding environment into a groin structure in order to create a defensive bank and grow as rapidly as possible. And we sought to figure out a strategy for the inclusion of native plants into this arrangement. There's a relatively high degree of demand to diversify the vegetative tools we're using to create berm, and that was a prerogative. We landed on the mixed row option, which you'll see at the end, which installs willow poles and groins, and so all of the same tools to provide all of the same critical functions, but the fill, the excess space, the other area, we sought to populate with mixed native vegetation to get the best of both worlds. This is just above Thompson's Track. I'm sure a site many of you know well. Complete blowout there. We've got a really great site there that, well, I'll show you the growth later, but we've been very pleasantly surprised with just how well our techniques are working. This is following repair of the bank that you saw eroded in the previous slide. It has all the elements from the graphic, including the anchor tree protection, the groin structures, the new stop banks, the willow poles, but in between those willow poles you also notice the installed native vegetation. We didn't just put native propagates from the nursery straight into bare stone. We used a geotextile technology, which had a range of products in it, and it was installed in the following manner, utilising a forestry ripper with a chute. We had a really great time installing this. We had the help of Fulton Hogan and a few of the staff who have actually been working in the Hakatiri River corridor for a long time, but not doing this. We quite intentionally wanted to work with suppliers who had a history of working in the area to try and do a new thing, just to get the best of the local knowledge, as well as making and trialling the changes that we were seeking to trial. So, on the left, you can see a general assortment of the species we used. We do get asked what we were putting in. Lots of tuitui and harakiki, as well as miki, Capropoma papinquas, things like manatū, ribbonwoods, and little bits and pieces of pittosporum and things like that, and then a handful of tōtara, just for the sake of putting a legacy tree in. But the focus was on early pioneering species that are already growing wild into a braided river environment where a seed source exists. They're a biodegradable bag, and we do have another one that the supplier is developing for us now. That one still had a microplastic content, for full disclosure, so that was a shame, but it was minimal, and we had one season to install, and now we've got the same product with a hemp fibre as the structural support, so we're away laughing now. The other version of the strategy we employed was the block planting, like this. So these were dug straight into the ground with the geotextile installed over top. The reason for this is simply that this is ground which, if left, would entirely repopulate with suckering willow, coppice shoots, and blackberry, and that's about it. The big site here listed here is on the true left bank, on the northern bank of the Orari River, upstream of Lloyd Road. If anyone's interested, it's fully accessible. There's windrows and things all around it, but it's visible if you want to go, or if you just want to look at it on the satellite images, you can see these. So the intention just being to just get something else into the vegetative assemblage of this reach. How did it go? Really quite well. The site on the left was one that was installed by one of our suppliers that just didn't meet the specification. They just didn't understand. It was at Thompson's track, just above on the other side of the river there, and they dug it into the stones. They completely muffed it. We had to pursue them for costs and all that sort of carry on, but it ended up being an incredibly helpful test case. So it's our reference point. We ended up with about 40% mortality, but plants were still alive. They simply weren't growing. But it was incredibly helpful to compare those to the treated plants in the bags ripped in on the other side of the river, within a kilometre of the same site, so same soils, presumably the same levels of soil moisture, and to see what I call it sort of 300% growth. So they went in at a standard 300 millimetres tall, and they're now standing up above a metre, so they've tripled in size, compared to standing still on the other side. So look, it's going really well. It continues to grow really well. Yeah, it's been standing there a long time. Yeah. Did I skip one? No. Yeah. So what comes next? To be honest, I've just spent the last 2 weeks writing maintenance contracts, so that comes next. But I did want to sort of include something. We met with a couple of the catchment groups at a series of planning workshops that were organised by the Ministry for Primary Industries over the last month, and one of the things that was emphasised there was functional corridors. I don't know if anyone's familiar with an idea of the corridor concept. It's been around for a few years now, but essentially it serves to consider the arrangement of reserves across a landscape in order to maximise seed transfer by terrestrial birds. Basically just says that if you have reserves of a certain size 2.5 kilometres apart, then the birds are more likely to visit, and you will connect your reserves into a corridor. That was something that was built into where we chose to work in the ECAN flood protection, but it's also something that we'll continue to develop just to fill any gaps that we've got in our assets, and to just continue to be able to draw a line consistent with this idea, which is fairly well supported by ecologists. For example, that's, I mean, you'll be familiar with this, but that's Alford Forest, I think it's called, and we've got some parcels of ECAN land within that. It's about 2.8 kilometres, which is just perfect to try and start to get that asset thing going. We have one site there, but we're going to develop it. Interestingly, we actually have kakatea and wild seedlings and things growing in the boom there. It's already largely functional itself, so we're not going to have to do a whole lot to keep that developing. But there you go, that's one example. If you are particularly interested in any of the detail, then we did write it all out. This is a lovely slide from one of my team. But these are available, they're on our website, you're more than welcome to them. If you think this is ideas or approaches that might be relevant to someone else working in the areas that you're involved with, then ask. I'm more than happy to share what we've done. And there's similar comment on how we went elsewhere. But yeah, that's enough from me. Yeah, leave it there. If there's any particular questions.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's great to see the work that's being done as well as the learnings that can then be shared. Do we have any questions? Yeah.
Yep. Were there any floods that washed it away? Because we had a look at, I went up one day and we had a look up the Ashburton, above one of the bridges up there, and some were out in the river, so I was just concerned that all the good work will one decent flush and you'll send them down the river. So is that going to happen?
Yeah, so how's that considered? I mean, yeah, it's kind of par for the course working on the berm. Anything we do in the flood protection estate is vulnerable to flooding. We have had several events in the 3 years we've been operating. We had quite a decent event in the Selwyn that went right over the top of a planting. Everything stayed in the ground. Worst thing that happened was the guards washed away. On the Arari, one of those Scour Bay sites, was quite interesting. We had quite a reasonable event, so I think it would have just been considered a standard annual fresh. It entirely eroded away one of the gravel groins and all of the anchor tree protection associated with it. But all of our planted assets and all of the poles remained intact. We lost about a metre on the riverward face, but not much more. So, it's been tested to a degree. It has been overtopped. And it's been covered in, we've had several assets covered in debris, but have survived through that. We haven't had anything entirely washed out, but I guess I definitely concede that having any river protection asset entirely washed out in a protection infrastructure suite is normal. That is the worst case scenario for both our work as well as the standard engineering structures. So yeah, I guess that the other way we're seeking to mitigate that is to simply not kind of put all eggs in one basket. We do intend to spread and stagger the reserves throughout the system in order to not have everything hit at one time. Yeah, typically scour is point damage. Yeah.
Another quick question. I see in the report, it's cost tracking. You've basically said you did within your budget, but that means nothing. Do we have to sell the farm to repeat it, or is it possible to? Can we do it again, but without having to put my rates up another 10%?
Yeah. We have.
You should be so lucky it's only 10.
Yeah. Look, we've got more than enough to continue with our work, just not at the same scale that we had the opportunity to operate with. We basically moved our strategy to install good representations of this idea and these strategies on all of those rivers, and you saw the spread of our assets and the phase one sort of capital installation that we were able to do. We're going to move now to any new thing we do is just going to be to fill the gaps and put a new asset in where there's one missing, depending on the things that we use to scope, or to add to an asset that might need an increase in size or whatever. So, we are continuing. It's general work that we'll put in to have this represented on region-wide, from general rates, just part of the long-term plan. So, yeah, apologies for the increase so far. I don't anticipate another one. We've got enough to do at the moment. But to do another job of this size, this was $10 million, and we're quite happy to get about 9.4 of that into the ground, which was really good.
So mine's a sort of follow-up question, really. So you've got this concept of corridors, 2.5 kilometres or whatever you said between, and now you're saying, the future is trying to fill in the gaps. Have you mapped where private landowners have got similar sorts of plantings, but not necessarily quite in the berm, but but adjacent to the berm? And I'm thinking of McDonald's up at the top of the Hines and Langdon's on the south bank of the Ashburton, and there are private landowners who've got similar sort of plantings. Can you map those and incorporate them into your whole design so that you're sort of connecting? You're not working in silos. You're thinking about the bigger picture.
No, that's a good comment. I haven't. We did limit our scoping to the river corridor, but I don't think a bird cares about tenure, so it's a valid point. And certainly we took into account remnant stands of wild vegetation that we knew about. So, for example, some of the things that formed where we worked, like on the Orari River, for example, on the upstream end, there's several private areas that are in standing, Karnika woodland, for example, and those meant that we went elsewhere in order to incorporate those. So yes and no. I think we did what we had record of, but we didn't do it in full, and that would be really good.
You'd be a good contact, because you've probably got a better idea where some of these plantings are on private land, and maybe that's something that your team could work with people like Ange, who works with private landowners to make that connection, and so that you get a bit sort of an overarching strategy, which might a plan that might be more effective. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian, because clearly I was going to come in with collaboration. I just wonder, because now Chris is in the room, if you wouldn't mind jumping back, thank you for your presentation. If you wouldn't mind jumping back to the Thompson's track boom transition that you'd done there. And I was just thinking, isn't it a shame Chris isn't in the room because he's chairman of the Ashburton Forks Catchment Group, which brings me to the collaboration opportunity. So not only have we got the planting, the corridors component of it, we've also got the predator control component of it also, where we plant, we must protect and look after.
Is that Craig Yellow's place?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you gave a helicopter view of, was it Thompson's track, where there was quite a big, yeah. So there's definitely opportunities to collaborate, and we'd be really, really keen to investigate some of those. Unfortunately, it wasn't at the workshop, the recent one, but no doubt that was the start of some of those conversations. We've got Christian in the room, our ecologist and biodiversity person, so through our recently published biodiversity strategy, now talking implementation, corridors and planting and predator control and all of that's woven all through this document, so it's a good chance to, and Runanga involvement has happened already, so if we could enhance some of those discussions. I'd like to point out that the Ashburton Water Zone Committee was ahead of the game, because we did some boom transition stuff, well perhaps not quite, but our big planting 5 or 6 years ago south of the State Highway 1 bridge, so we didn't necessarily have the formula with the canopy and so forth, but I think overall that was quite successful. And then we give out funds as a zone committee, as you'll be aware. So there's a recent one that we've supported. There's a guy called Roth Hawthorne doing some significant planting on the north side of the Ashburton River below State Highway 1. Recently talking to Sean McCracken about it and some of what Ross is doing by hand with Old Man Bear clearing, big tasks. And Sean's kind of saying, look, we could have some gear in the area and we could help out with that because we're fundamentally supporting what it is that he's trying to achieve. So there's another chance right beside State Highway 1 bridge, a whole lot of Old Man's Beard. How amazing would it could be if we could enhance that area as sort of a bit of a shop front. We've got an enthusiastic biking community that's engaged with some of that as well. So we've got the funds, the people, the projects, the eagerness, if we could weave it all together. Because I've been watching your project with interest for a while, and we have met and talked about it briefly a couple of times. But it's great to be hearing about it now and then and looking at what next. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. And eager to participate. We've sort of tried to come in and work alongside our local colleagues who already hold the interactions and the contacts and that sort of thing, and to work alongside to get their support. And so, yeah, like the Thompson Track one's a good example. Donna Field has been engaged here with Craig for years and doing bits and pieces, and she still hassles us on the phone and says, get down there and you got to do this and that. And so that's great. That is what we need. I guess I'm just trying to say that I intended to try and address the silos that can inevitably happen, or the local engagement, which can be really difficult. It's by trying to just work as directly as possible with our local staff who have the relationships you're talking about as well, and intend to continue to do so. And in terms of collaboration, I have absolutely no problem making our team available to facilitate the work already happening on the ground, or to bring one of the pieces or whatever it is. We have no need to drive something ourselves necessarily, but we're available to participate in whatever capacity is appealing. Yeah, I don't know, it might be a throwaway, but just to mean we're not trying to come in and take anything over, but we want to work with very much.
A good example, if I can just add one more. So with the Kānuka Trust, we've been doing restoration in Hinds for probably 3 or 4 years now with Hinds School and the Hinds Reserve. So some of those plantings are now mature enough to be flowering our kowhai. So we're seeing bellbirds in Hinds now. We didn't used to. So if you build it, they will come. So they can come down the river, clearly. That's the corridor that they're accessing. And then we must be 2.5 Hinds, or, within that. So the more of those types of discussions that we can host collectively, the greater the buy-in, because people then start to understand the why and how it all ties in together.
Awesome. Yep. Just quickly wanted to reference the work of Te Ara Kakariki through the Selwyn district. I know it's a neighbouring area, but they are an example of a external to government organisation who have sought to establish a series of green dots, delivering the corridor concept with whoever will participate. And so certainly in that district, our work sought to supplement what they were doing and to work with and alongside where their reserves were, and to build into their existing network. So they've got quite a good framework of how, and they've got good examples of what integrated reserve delivery looks like there. So just to say there's a reference, I think they're quite a good example of interagency delivery of a corridor across the plain. It's certainly my go-to for what it can look like. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks for that presentation, Stanley. I'm conversant with the project and what your team has been doing around Ashburton. I have 2 questions for you, but before that, just to add to your response to Ian McKenzie's question and what Angela said. In our strategy, we have an action to develop a water model for ecological corridor, and it relates well with what your team is doing, and I'll bring you into that conversation going forward and see how we can develop that model I have funding for the modeling already, and we hope for that to take place by July 2025 in our medium-term actions. And also we've been trying to collaborate with the MCCC and the Kanuka Trust, because for us to get to the community, we have to go through the body that organizes activities for the landowners. And then my question for you is, can we be able to replicate this project at every 5 kilometers of our river burns around the district? And if yes, what could be the cost estimate from what you've done so far?
Our Scour Bay strategies were installed at $11 per unit for the first year, with $3 maintenance in the subsequent 2 years, giving a total of 17 for 3 years to establish. And the sub-canopy plantings were installed at $9 per plant in the first year, with $4 the next year and $3 after that to establish. So that's per plant, which I think is helpful for scalability. Can it be done? Yes. Does it cost money? Yes. I would emphasize, though, just one, it's very helpful to have a metric like planting numbers, and it's incredibly helpful for me to be able to give you a cost attached to plants. But I really just want to take a minute to emphasize wild recruiting or wild regeneration of native seedlings. On the Waimakariri, at the we have a site immediately downstream of the gorge. It has 4 or 5 species of wild shrub, and in response to our work, which is intentionally located around wild remnant standing adults, we were seeing flushes of seedlings into our plantings, which is an important part of our specification for maintenance, that any supplier performing maintenance in our sites is capable of avoiding control of wild regenerating seedlings. It's a quality measure. We were around a patch with 2 trees. We measured over 8,000 seedlings over the 2 years of that reserve being there. For the cost of $1,600 of maintenance over that same period, the per plant cost of a wild regenerating recruit is fractions of cents, and they grow twice as fast as a propagate. So I just really want to emphasize the value of wild plants in these systems. Given that we're trying to stimulate wild dispersal by planting, we need to just really make sure we stay cognizant of the value of capturing wild plants and working in a supplementary fashion. So our reserves, as we're putting a boom transition asset, it is helpful for thinking to create an item that's installed into the landscape, but nearer the foothills where the native wild populations are typically higher, some of our assets only involve targeted weeding, because that's all that's needed. The top of the Arari is a fantastic example. It backs directly onto the dock estate, and we're seeing the germination of tortara and kowhai and fivefinger and lemurwood into the flood protection weeds amongst the old man's beard. And so selective targeted weeding is sufficient to get that to establish and to grow through. It's just, sorry to hammer it home, but planting is convenient for logistics. And it's a fantastic community event, and the social value is immense, and it's absolutely by far and away the most popular activity to involve local community in. But in many other areas of the Braided River, and the majority, like we occupy the 20% of the lower modified reaches in most cases across the region. But in the upper, lower populated reaches with less than 2 people per square kilometre, targeted weeding of the berm in an intentional, structured, repeated manner is sufficient to give priority to wild native recruits. And so just to add another layer to your to your question. Yeah.
Can I just have a follow-up question to that? Look, is the stuff, and this is sort of as much for Angus members, is the stuff they can do in a weed infested area to encourage that regeneration by a bit of crushing or just spraying a bit or here and there to open up the ground to allow the seedlings to establish? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had small levels of involvement with the community. Well, I've been a ranger and things for years, so we've had versions of this. It's more or less, big generalisation, apologies, really difficult to make weeding appealing. Yeah, nods. It's just one of those things that is a hard sell. But it's difficult in the sense of getting people out to attend, but I would argue that it's more rewarding after the event than planting or another community activity ever will be, because the level of impact and the nature of the impact is substantially so much more. So yeah, there are definitely things. There's nothing more satisfying than looking at than scarfing an old man's beard off a tree and then looking at this thing wilting up above you. It's really quite good, but yeah, it can be tricky. Anything to add?
No, I'm meeting with Christian on Thursday, so I think this is a big part of all the implementation of the strategy discussions, so we absolutely can take it offline, but I think we've got some local people who are doing it and doing it well. We can draw some experience from them and just pull all of it together, but we've used Te Ara Krakariki quite a bit as advisors for what we're doing down here and have been doing that for 5 or 6 years. So, hey, we're getting there. We're not as advanced, but that's the direction. That's a
fantastic
travel pathway.
Yeah, and I guess the function of my team is to be a conduit with our engineering colleagues. Their sole focus is to provide flood protection benefit for local communities. Our job is to be the sidecar and to provide opportunities for multi-value projects in the same space, because they can coexist. That's our job, to make them do so, or to facilitate it wherever we can. So, sounds good.
All right, this is all the questions. Thanks for coming to give us the updates, and yeah, look forward to seeing more of the work. Now we've got some committee updates. Oh. Yeah, do we receive the presentation on the Perham Transition Project? Yes. Great. Angela, and I think, is that Richard? I think so. All right, on to the committee updates. Are you doing that, or is it just, yeah.
Agenda item number 11, committee updates. That first note, the Zone Committee Action Plan budget. So one of the requirements of the grant agreements that we send out is that project progress reports be provided. So we have received some from HH Wet, Adele Webb, Pudding Hill Stream, that's Ashburton District Council, and the Wairuna Runoff Project. There was an update that was received at the workshop following last month. They are attached as additional agenda items to the agenda if you want to have a read of those. One thing to note on the Zone Committee Action budget for this year, so it has been confirmed through the long-term plan that there will be $50,000 per zone for Zone Committee Action Plan projects, and we are looking to, I guess, roll over the action plans for the next, I guess, till the end of the year once we know a bit more about the outcome of the CWMS Zone Committee review. And on that note, I just wanted to check in with the committee to see if you're happy to take a similar approach to last year, where we advertised the funding and then collectively made recommendations or decisions on the recommendations. Is that the approach that the Zone Committee wants to take this year as well? Any thoughts?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So do we have like two takes? Like, do we, because we don't have to receive an application and wait right till the end, do we? Do we have a,
I guess, like, it's probably imperative that you, the zone committee looks to get the funding spent this year. Just, I guess, because with the zone committee review and whatnot, like the way it could look, we are just kind of having these discussions as a facilitation team. We could run something similar where we have, say, a month or two of advertising, and then look to run a workshop, say, around October, September, October-ish, and then confirm your decisions in November. So that way we'll, I guess, we'll have everything kind of wrapped up this first half of the financial year.
You sort of saying do 2 application groups?
Sorry, no, just having, I guess, one, I guess, application period in the next.
Give out the 50,000 before January.
Yeah, so that the money is all allocated. I guess it'd be by Christmas essentially.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, so we have to just work in with our comms team as well, because they support us with that. So I can just email you with any decisions that come out on how we kind of want to collectively do that as well. Cool. That's good.
I was just declaring interest. I'll abstain from any discussion on that one, as I've got an application in already.
you or your catchment group?
I'm the chair of the catchment group that's got an application in already.
Right. Yes, so there has been one that has been received, one application which I've just put on hold for now while we kind of work out what the process looks like.
Yeah, it's good practice if we advertise it, go through the process and allocate, then we don't have, like, vested interests can be seen to have known the process, and then it works, I think it works much better. District council do the same thing, and it's very clean. And Carol, you can tell us, when does the district council do its, just because that is biodiversity money too, so it's sometimes quite good to, Christian will know, when do we give out our money, Christian?
Our next biodiversity grant will be February next year. We don't have money for August grant round this year. Yeah.
Okay, so happy to have an application period, workshop to consider, decisions made by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Great. One fund that is open is the Waitaha Action to Impact Fund. So there's just some information there, just noting that applications do close on Monday, the 2nd of September.
Is that been shared anywhere that we could share it? Have you seen it? Sorry,
There is a link. I can actually send you the link. It is on the Environment Canterbury website. I think some comms went out a newsletter on I'm not sure quite how wide that was spread or like what network that was. But yeah, I can share the Word document of this agenda item as well, which has the link, but I'm guessing it probably hasn't come up since it's been PDF. Moving on to number 3, actions from previous meetings and workshops. I'll just go down to the ones that are underway. Request an update on the progress of the Rakitata Revival Steering Group, and to request the Zone Committee has representation on that group. So we did receive a written update which was supplied in June, and I will, if you're happy to, see if we can get an update down the track, and I will need to follow up on that request around Zone Committee representation. Provide Wakanui Hapua information from Environment Canterbury and Ashburton District Council, which we have on file to the Wakanui Beach Crew Group. So that is underway. We've provided the report that is also noted as action number 7, and still working on the Environment Canterbury information as well. Number 5, that letter was the one was referenced earlier in the meeting as being what has been sent to Environment Canterbury. So that was done after this agenda was put together, so that's now complete. And then for number 6, a letter be written to groups who have received funding for traps to obtain statistics and frequency of use of the traps. So Staveley Camp Committee are putting together their progress report for the Zone Committee, so Gender Spa is going to include that information. It is, I think they do record it in Trap NZ, so that will be provided. But I just wanted to check with the Zone Committee, were you after, I guess, stats from any group that has received funding for traps as one of the components of their projects? Because I think, like, looking back at the Zone Committee Action Plan projects, that's the only one in the Ashburton zone where it's been specifically for traps. So I just wanted to clarify that since I wasn't here at that last
I don't
meeting.
recall it ever being discussed at any other meeting. I was away from that meeting, so I can only assume it was about the traps.
I think the idea was that, several groups were applying for fund for traps, and we were just saying, well, for example, the Staveley group had a plan on how to build traps, and Russell Langdon had one too. It's just sort of coordinating, where they could find the traps, the pricing, are they all trapped in the same area, all that sort of just. I did notice in the Ashburton Guardian, was it this morning or yesterday, about a dog or something got caught in a trap down by Ashburton, by Whakanui somewhere, so we just need to make sure that these traps are being. All the applications we've given them to, they've all got a trapping plan in place, but we need to make sure that it's being adhered to. So it's really just a coordination thing, Jamie.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. All right, I'll follow up on that. And then item 4, Zone Committee calendar. So the next meeting is the 27th of August, and we have the Hekiao Hines report back from Environment Canterbury staff, and then also an update from Brett Painter for HH Wet. Just wanted to check, is that a meeting where you would like to possibly have in the Hines area, or are you happy to have it at the council chambers?
Why not have it in the Hines area? Can you serve it though?
That will be a problem. If you go off-site, you'll lose the ability for live streaming and Teamsing, unless you find a place in Hines that has that capability, but I would struggle to think there would be somewhere.
So Environment Canterbury has AV equipment that we use for the Selwyn Waikato Zone Committee meetings. You wouldn't be, as Carol said, you wouldn't be able to live stream it, but we would be able to provide a Teams link, provided the Wi-Fi is suitable.
With Hines, what do you feel then about having that paper on the Hines report? So it's really going to be what's going forward. Should we be doing it in the community or do it here, or what do you think? Who's going to be there? Well, I think if we took it to the local community, you'd probably have quite a few local citizens would be there that are affected by consent.
I guess was going to come in here.
Well, they probably would if it was advertised.
Otherwise, could you do it if you combine it as a field trip coming out of Mackenzie's or up to Congo?
Well, why don't we receive the report here, have the presentation here, we'll let the HH, they'll know, so that'll encompass everyone, and then we can have a field trip maybe the following meeting or something if any issues come out, if there's some radical proposals or a bit of a follow through on the ground stuff.
How big an agenda are we likely to have that now?
Not big, but look, we can manage
That's
that, Jamie.
Just
That'll be
those
quite
two
big
items.
enough, those two items, so.
Possibly a follow-up to the latest one.
Has anybody signalled what they expect to do with the report?
No, I'm just, I guess, working with staff at the moment.
It's been 3 months in the making, hasn't it?
Yeah, yep. I think we've had to postpone it a couple of times.
The reason I asked that question, and
Yeah.
it was in the reason that I thought was that
You need your microphones in
And nothing from the HH-WET working group or in the report has even made it into the regional policy statement. So I was just wondering what it is we're hoping to achieve.
With that report, I guess from my understanding, it's one of the requirements, isn't it, for the consent?
I guess my concern is that there are, further up the feeding chain you go, they ignore these things, and it would be nice if it had some pertinence and had some function, other than just something to put in a file somewhere and then be ignored. But it looks to me like the senior people at ECAN aren't interested in it anyway, because it doesn't feature in any high-level document. And so I guess I'm saying it should do, with the amount of work that's going on there from the community and from the zone committee and everything else, and it's a critical part of PC2, that it should get some recognition from people in the hierarchy at ECAN, and I don't see that anywhere as far as I can see.
Okay.
So I'm sort of flagging it as a,
No, that's
yeah,
good to know.
we want to make sure that there are important people who take note of that it's happening, and that it is going to be a useful tool at least in the RPS, if not in the next land and water plan.
So I've probably helped to drive some of those conversations, just with the benefit of hindsight. With the last report that came out around PC2 and in particular in the Hekio Hines, there was a whole lot of stuff in there that, you look at the Parakanoi, for example, we had red crosses all through us. The fact that it had been dry for however long, it felt like it was completely ignored. So, but then once it's in a report, trying to get the genie back in the bottle with these context discussions just felt nigh on impossible. So I guess I've been trying to front foot proactive discussions about on-farm mitigation. So some of that information that you've just identified that's sitting out there, at what stage do we as a community and a catchment group and the Hines Strains Working Party and all those other ones that are beavering away, at what stage do we have to not manipulate, but to have sort of some influence over, the outcome of some of these reports to ensure that they do reflect more accurately, not just the regulation space, but the us space.
Well, the Parakanoi is perfectly up. ECAN talked about silos before, but the left hand didn't know what the right hand's doing. Cover with the water supply. PC2 made the Parakanoi to be quite an important part of priorities for PC2 and the Hines and the Hines Hekio, what do we call it, Working Party. But in fact, in the meantime, the District Council, under the instruction of the Regional Council, shut down all the water source that came into the Parakanoi and killed it all. So it was dry for 5 years, it's got no value at all. Now, could potentially have value in the future, but it's got no value, ecological values at the moment. So I guess, and that's the issue I'm worried about, is that we've got a local community working quite hard to try and do stuff, but you've got a regional authority who are working on some bigger picture which doesn't include the detail down on the catchment level. And I just want to make sure that we have a connection there. That's not a dig at. Sorry.
No, I'm used to it. The purpose of the HH-WET report is to get them good information there out to the right people. Is that what the purpose of it is? So why wouldn't you have that meeting in Christchurch, in the chambers in Christchurch, and invite them to walk 30 steps down the stairs and be at the meeting? If you want to get the information to them, that's the only way. You have it at Hines, you just have a few converted farmers and people there. You have it here, you'll have us here. If you want a bigger audience, you have to go to the audience. So that'd be the only.
The purpose of the report, as I understand it, when this plan was put in place, there were certain parameters around water consents, time frames, all those sort of things, and that's why they monitor all these drains, and that's why the Working Party was there. This report is ECAN telling us, well, we've noticed what the Hines Drains Working Party's done. We agree that, it's been successful and the water minimum flows can stay the same, or this or that, or it could say, well, look, it hasn't worked. We're recommending that the water flows change in 2025, and it could be quite heavy hitting. And Joe and I have been quite forceful back to ECAN saying, well, don't come to us with half a report. You know, that's why it's been delayed. So they've assured us that it'll be ready by August. We're meant to have this now. So it will be quite a searching document. And as you say, I'm just presuming they'll be making their recommendations, which could have some quite unforeseen effects on the community, which we don't know. So to that end, I think we're probably better having it here. Let the people know, the public who want to come can come, and then we'll decide what to do once we receive the report. That would be my thoughts.
Bill, do you believe that the regional council's got a good context as to what has actually happened, dry years, wet years? Any report's only as good as dumb information and there's a dumb report out. So it's all very well telling the story as you see it, but actually you've got to know the context around it. Do you think that they will have put enough emphasis on the background context to it?
What gives me confidence, Chris, is that it's had a lot of input from the working group parties, so the Craig Flemings of the world and the groups that are feeding into them the whole time, and they have had a liaison person, so I certainly hope they do, and they should have, yeah. Better than other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it should be good.
Right, so. Yeah, so I think the consensus is to have the meeting here next month. Okay, done. Yeah, it's true. Okay, that brings us to the end, so we need a decision there to receive.
Can we receive the updates from the committee? Chris and Bill? Thank you. Other business is that Angela is appointed as the zone committee representative on the Ricard Catchment Environmental Enhancement Society.
Carol, we need a decision for that, don't we?
Easy need a
Yeah.
resolution, you need.
So I move the decision, and can that be seconded? By Chris? Great, congrats, Ange, thank you for...
Yay, me. So because I'm such a proactive sort of person, I'd like to update you that they have their AGM on August the 22nd and their next meeting. So if anybody has any information they want included, please let me know.
Angela, could I just ask a question? Are they, at those meetings, is that when they consider funding applications?
It is indeed. So that's where I got the 2 a year idea. They do it twice a year. So they have their meetings and consider the applications. So I think they usually have 3 meetings a year, but the funds allocated twice.
Okay, thanks. Just checking.
Great, well, I think that is the end of everything, so yeah, we'll... Ooh, Chris?
Can I just raise a point? It's a bit of a late item, but it's just general topic. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were talking about the Ashburton River, for example, and they weren't aware of information, and they should have probably, that years ago that RDR used to discharge water into the South Branch of the Ashburton River, and that's why it became a really good salmon fishery. When we've gone through consent hearings, when we've gone through planning processes and whatever, the only authority that seems to be ECAN seems to go to, and some of the scientists, if they've gone to the Ashburton Guardian, is the sole source of the truth. There's a lot of general information in our community out there. How do we actually gather the information, that context of what's gone on over the last 50, 70, 80, 100 years? Because a lot of that information is human knowledge. Some of it is disappearing. And who is the right organisation to actually collate that background knowledge through, whether it be Runanga or whatever? There's a whole lot of information out there that when you go through a new planning process, like Ian just sort of alluded to, there will be a new RPS, how do you put the right information out there that is true, and how can the zone committee help so that because it's the community's information, so it is a resource. I know when they were doing the Ashburton River, there was one of the NIWA, the ex-NIWA guys, Graham Horrell, he went and interviewed a whole lot of people, and there's information on that. Some of it I agree with, some of it's probably a bit out of context. But how can we hold a vault of information. I'm putting some food for thought there rather than a decision item.
Yeah.
But how do we stimulate conversations? Because otherwise we're going to end up with, sooner or later, a new plan that's going to go pear-shaped when you've got to have that context. So I just want to put it to the group. Is it something that's worth considering as part of a work plan, or something that we do or can do while we still exist?
So further to that, I mean, and I've given that a lot of thought too, specific to the Hinds River, with the Mayfield Hinds irrigation terminating into the Hinds in that period when, you know, then you've got people like Brad Edwards referring to it as a world-renowned fishery without a whole lot of context. So a while ago, ECAN did a series of What's Our Why. I think they started in Kaipoi and did some other ones, but it's quite a comprehensive document in terms of the historical context, scientifically, anecdotally, papers past. It's a great document to go through because it really does tell the story of the river. And so I've started doing that with the Hinds. And well, there's still people like Rab, you know, who have farmed on the banks of it for however long, or Dennis down on the lower reaches, or whatever that looks like. So if we could find, you know, the right person to conduct those interviews, and to pull sort of a framework. Well, this other document is a framework, if you like. To me, it's very easy to read. So it's just probably a case of finding the right person and accessing some funding. But is that the sort of thing that we could do with our zone committee funding? Because I think they'd be invaluable pieces of a resource.
Well, I think it's a great point, because we had an example today with the Lake Camp, Clearwater, with the Balmacronan stream, and everyone talked about 50 years ago that it was open, but no one knows what happened before then or whatever, but someone will know. Even recently, you know, the Hinds Drain Working Party then became HH Wet, so that's a history. How did that happen? So you're onto it. I don't know who does this timelining, but it would be good knowledge to have.
It'd be nice not to have to use the special funding that we do, although we do have discretion for that. But how do we start a process? We've got to start it with a conversation around this group, and then whether we can see if there is, I'm sure there's some fat in the system somewhere, Ian. But I just think it's, if we don't start it sooner or later, there's some of that institutional knowledge that's out in our community, and unless it was written in The Guardian, someone will, I've seen it where it's actually used as evidence in hearings quite a few years ago, but
It could be good use of our money,
yeah.
Richard will kill me if we. He's very sensitive about his rate rises, quite rightly. There are, and it doesn't go 100% to answering your question, but there are a lot of reports, historical reports, and I'm pretty certain, because ECAN inherited all the catchment board stuff, most of that file stuff is still in the record somewhere. But you'd have to be smarter than me to be able to delve into the dark recesses of the back rooms of ECAN to find some of that information. But I mean, there are reports, and some of them are accurate and some of them are inaccurate. And I know when we had the Hinds Working Party that ECAN commissioned Gail Tipper on behalf of Ngāi Tahu to do a report on the Hinds Drainage District, and she clearly knew nothing about the Hinds Drainage District. And some of the comments she made in her report were totally wrong, including the purpose of the home paddock drain, which Bill and I understand, but she didn't and you won't, so I won't go into the detail. But the point is that some of these reports are accurate and some of these reports are highly inaccurate. But the fact is they get filed, stowed away, and that report will still be on file at ECAN, and people will go back to it and say, oh, Gail Tipper was the authority on the Hinds Drainage District, and so she must be right, when in fact 90% of what she wrote in her report was bullshit. But even then, there was, you know, when you push back on it, we were told that we had no authority to push back on it. So it's an interesting dilemma you're raising. I'm not sure that ECAN's got the money to do it, but there is a lot of information. It would be worth delving in. Just go back into the reports. Yeah, and MPI probably have a lot of reports too you can access. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's a good idea. Just what's the best way to approach it and actually get, you know, like we could make a website and people could submit, but then probably the people that would submit are not using computers as actively as the younger generation, yeah.
It's whether we can somehow, I don't know, get someone from archives within ECAN to come along to as the zone committee, talk about some of the reports that are out there. If we want to try and correct some of that information, if we, I don't know, how do we put a project together if we put it on as an agenda item sometime and work around it? Because I think it actually, it's more than a general business item, but I just wanted to raise it.
Yeah, no, it's important, and as you say, we're going to lose more and more knowledge every year, so, yeah.
I'll just bring Romy Vanderboom into the discussion there. So we engaged her to do a lit review, similar access reports as a summer student, a very affordable sort of a way forward. And so we gave her a database of people to talk to. So she contacted the John Moores and Engelbrett or whoever. And then when she would talk to someone, they'd say, oh, so surely you've spoken to such and such. So it's a nice way to flush out.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a starting point. And I don't know when they start looking at revving into gear summer student projects, but I imagine it's relatively soon, if not now.
Yep. All right, got that, Jamie?
Yeah. But just thinking that might be something to add to that September date, 24th of September, possibly like a workshop.
Well, it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be a workshop, but actually someone comes along who knows about where the records are, comes along with a suite of Ashburton reports that they've got, and let's start looking at some of that stuff and saying, well, yes, we agree with that, no, we don't, let's go and...
First question is, does ECAN have an archivist?
We could Legoimer it.
Looking at it.
Is that an action? Are you directing that that's happening? Is that an action?
I'm just saying it could potentially be...
So, no, then I won't put it in.
I'd like to morph it into an action, because otherwise the can gets kicked down the road. If we get dispersed to zone committees, it goes nowhere.
Okay, what's your absolute action? What do you want to happen?
Do you want me to ask to see if ECAN has an archivist as a staff?
I just want to know what the action is.
Yeah, so that's the action.
Okay, Carol, that we investigate the records for the Ashburton River, and is it
Historical records.
is the and someone to present from ECAN to present what historical records and how you correct them?
This is the first step to see if anybody knows that. So if we investigate and see whether the market we have, we can ask them how they could maybe they can come down to the zone committee to talk about how you access this information. If they don't ask to speak specific about what information you want.
Stop there.
Yeah.
I'll move that.
Great.
You want to keep it quite the Hinds and the Ashburton River, don't you? Effectively so, because obviously the natural partner for the Hinds River is H.H. Wheat, isn't it, obviously?
Yeah, that's why I was talking about the Ashburton River.
Yeah. You want to go, what's being done or how's it being compiled, where's it sitting currently? Wouldn't that be the action, rather than actually you want something, you want to know how is it sitting. If it's not sitting, you would then drive an action to do something about it. Is that what you sort of suggest?
Well, I think Ian's office supplying us an archivist, so then we'll know what they've got and we'll go from there. And it'll cover all that. The creeks, cart out, the kitchen.
Great. All right, we'll wrap it up. Jamie, can you do the closing karakia for us?
Okay. Kia ora koutou, kua tāna ki te mutunga o te hui. Nā reira, me inoi tātou, kia ora. Ka whakairia te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, haumi e, hui e, tā e ki e. And just to explain that one, which I didn't explain the first one, but it's whakataka te hau. I think we've used it quite a few times, but this one is about removing the restrictions and clearing the pathways so that we can return to everyday activities. That's the gist of it, really.
Great, thank you.
Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.